Right, we are live. Just checking everything because last week, I think I did this session or the video last week. Well, maybe 4 times, 3 times, 4 times before it was eventually what it was supposed to be. So I'm doing it right the first time this time around. If you've not subscribed to my channel yet, please click the subscribe button. So just hang on, I hear myself. Okay, cool. I'll be ready to go. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, please go ahead, click the subscribe button. And yeah, we'll see what this year brings up in terms of Formula One. Last week, what a weekend, what a race we had. It was crazy. I don't think anybody anticipated what we saw last week, right? Yeah, it was just crazy. So as always, or as the previous week, I went ahead and reviewed the post-race reactions. So there are the videos, there are like 2 types of videos or interviews. There is what they call a post-race reaction. Drivers, immediately after they've done the race, a journalist pull them to one side and ask them 1 or 2 questions. And then there is the post-race press release or press conference where you have the first 3 drivers, and that's a little bit of a lengthy interview. So those are the 2 again that I looked at. Now, the people that I looked at is Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris. Now remember, obviously only the first 3 was at the post-race press conference, but Charles Leclerc, Lando Norris, Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton, and they were 1 or 2 others that I did listen to. I'll mention something if there's something significant, but the main thing I want to focus on today is the word try. And how many times that came up, who said it the most, you're going to be surprised. And yeah, and then some other things I will highlight just because I have actually addressed some of the things in last week's video, sort of a follow-up. So let's the way, just quickly first, the way people represent information using what we would call the representational system come out in their words, and that is why I'm looking at this and doing this. And this is something when you have conversations with people that you can also pick up in their conversations. And the whole idea around that is I mean, in everyday life, is that you are then able to direct or redirect your questions or your conversation with that person to steer it in a fruitful conversation, or in some instances to steer it away from conflict. So that's how that applies to day-to-day people in everyday life. Now, here's the interesting thing. The description people use to describe things or events do not only occur metaphorically. It's not just when they describe something like I'm hitting a wall. It's not just a metaphor. It also provides a literal, if you look at linguistics and how your brain works, it provides a literal description of what the person does inside of their head and how they code and represent information. So that it is so important and so profound if people can grasp this, especially high performers and athletes that want to excel, and even whoever wants to just get 1 step ahead. Now, words have power. Words have a powerful impact on our thought processes, our emotions and our feelings, and then subsequently our behaviors, which, whether we realize it or not, majority of these things happen subconsciously. People might say, and I hear this often, people might say, if people say so, especially my teenage son, he would say something and I would say, geez, but you're negative. No, I'm not negative. So in their mind, and a lot of adults do this still, if they do not consciously direct the speech, they don't feel it's anything to worry about. But the majority of these things happen subconsciously in your mind. And sometimes people start to use a phrase or a word, even maybe because they are in a season of their life or they have difficulty, and then they fall into the habit of using that. And I'll explain a little bit also why that is so significant and why you want to get rid of that, even if it's just a habit. So like I said, the one thing that stood out for me this week or on last week's interviews were the word try. At the very least, the term try implies failure, and if not, a lack of adequate action. If you say, like if I'm saying I'm going to try to do something, what I'm really telling myself, and here's the thing, remember, your mind only does what it thinks you want. Let's remember that. And this is not like a woo cloud in the sky thing. This is neuroscience. If I say I'm going to try something, all I'm telling myself and my mind is I'm going to attempt to do it, but actually I'm not going to do it. And if I'm, as opposed to if I say I will be doing it, if I am, well, will is also, but I am doing it. I'm doing something. That sounds significantly different than saying I'm trying to do something. And you can test it. Just sit where you are and say I'm going to try and exercise tomorrow versus I am going to exercise tomorrow. It's completely, yeah, and you can feel the difference in your body as well. Now, as we continue to use certain words, we reinforce them in our mind. That consistent reinforcement in our mind creates patterns based on the information input. So the information that comes in through our 5 senses, words we use, all of those things. And that direct our thought and our behavior. Now, if the input is try the whole time subconsciously, the mind will interpret this as attempting to the point of not succeeding. That's actually what your mind is saying. And if you combine that with past experience, now the input dictates the outcome. If we want to change the output, then you want to change the input and what comes into your mind. Okay, so let's go to the interviews. Like I said, I will highlight a few things because I spoke about them last week as well, but I'm not, at some point I'll address them in one of these videos. But also interesting is the metaphors that people use that imply struggle or imply instability. Charles Leclerc, during the post-race reactions, and I'll go through each individual, it's probably easier that way, and then we'll do the post-race press conference. So in the post-race reactions, Charles Leclerc did use the word trying. He say, I was always trying to make sure I will brake early into turn 1 to get the DRS, to get him back. That was Max Verstappen. That was the one place where he used the word trying. Then Lewis Hamilton, he was also using the word try. So that was Charles Leclerc once used the word try. Lewis Hamilton used the word try. I just need to count, but used the word try also once. I tried to here's the interesting thing before I forget. First question to Lewis Hamilton. I'm guessing when you woke up this morning, you weren't predicting a podium, were you? Lewis answered and said, I wasn't predicting a podium, but I was thinking about it. And then very quickly he say, I tried to manifest it, you know. Here's the interesting, it's almost like he said it as if he was, it felt uncomfortable to mention it now. Visualization and mental rehearsal is a key component of any professional, or should be a key component of any professional athlete's regime and mental practice and skills practice. And there's a right way of doing it and there's a wrong way of doing it. Just sitting there and imagining that you're going to win a race or you're going to stand on the podium is not enough. There's a whole process and scientific process around mental imagery and mental rehearsal, like the way we call it. It's extremely powerful because here's what will happen. is when you rehearse, let's say an event or a race or whatever the case might be, and you rehearse that over and over to the point, and here's the key, where you actually feel the emotions in your body, you hear the sounds that you hear, and you also just listen and feel what's going on around you. Like, let's take this as an example. If you are a Formula One driver and you want to visualize you on the podium, you can visualize the rounds, around the racetrack. You can visualize what you do when. You can visualize what you are hearing, what are the people, how the people are screaming, everything. When you go, anything that you would hear in a race weekend might be at that event for that period, right? The race day period. It can only be for the race. But there are certain ways I let my athletes practice it and we expand it. But here's the thing, you want to visualize it as if you are literally experiencing it, because here's what will happen. When you get onto the field or you get onto the track, your mind, remember now, your mind only does what it thinks you want. When you get onto that track, when you walk into that paddock the evening, and you are ready to race and you visualize that whole process, your mind is saying, oh, this feels familiar, this looks familiar, this whole picture is familiar. I know exactly what I need to do. That's what your mind is going to tell you. So that's why mental rehearsal is extremely important. And you should not be, I don't even want to use the word ashamed, but uncomfortable talking about it. And I wish more people would speak out about it. Okay, so that's where he used the word try. But then Lewis last week during the testing weekend, those were the interviews that I looked at, he did mention words, or used words that imply a lot of struggle and imply a lot of things are difficult. And so, and he continues that trend, unfortunately. You can go back and have a look at George Russell's interview also. They have the same issues, right? More or less the same issues, but the way he speaks about them are significantly different. So things that I've highlighted is working really, really hard. And he also used the word trying. We really are struggling. Use the words like degradation and lack of rear downforce. Big problem, not that fast, can't quite compete. Now, people might say, if you don't understand mental performance, people might say, yeah, but these are the words that people use in Formula One. Not if you look at the entire conversation or question that he answered, it was all about, it's one big mess. That's really what he's saying in his mind. Then George Russell never used the word try. So thumbs up for him in his driver's reaction interview. And here's the words. Remember now, they both drive a Mercedes. Here's the words he used: good start, comfortable, extraordinary, pleased with that, a huge amount of performance, pleased. He said again, there's more to come. So these are the types of words. So you see the difference between the words they are speaking. And I said it in last week's video, I think I did. George Russell is really one to watch. He was very disappointed with his performance and the qualifier. He's not where he wants to be for obvious reasons. Okay, then, oh man, Kevin Magnussen, I don't think you can, I guess, I don't know if anybody could have wiped the smile off his face yet. We'll see this afternoon. Okay, he used the word try once. Okay, then get back to Lando Norris. Man, you got to feel for that guy. He is the one that used the word try the most from the interviews that I listened to. 6 times in that short space of time. And his interview, the one that I listened to, was less than 2 minutes, I think 1 minute 53 seconds, 6 times. And also the metaphors he uses was things like it was just tough to hang onto the car, hanging onto something. Also a metaphor of movement implies instability. Stuff is not stable around you. So he used, like, especially when you're around quicker cars, you want to try and keep up by trying to be too over optimistic. And then he goes on and then he says you're pushing to try and do better, but also back at MTC to work hard as possible for next week to try and bring some improvements, and then just try to start afresh. Journalists ask him something else. He comes back. He says, you saw us suffering a lot, so we can try some things for next week. So he might want to eliminate those words out of his vocabulary. What would be interesting, I thought, was to actually go and listen to, which I didn't, but go and listen to Daniel Ricciardo and listen if he uses the same type of language and type of linguistics. And if he does, might be a team thing, right? That I don't want to say negativity, but there might be a team thing then sitting there. Okay, Max Verstappen did not use the word try, so he and George Russell were the winners in this one. And then we move on to the post-race press conference. Charles Leclerc used the word try once in one of the questions that a journalist asked. What I thought was interesting is that Lewis Hamilton still uses a lot of disassociation words, like they, them. I spoke about it last week as well. I'm not going to go too much into that today. I might do a specific session on that because that's really interesting. He do not name the individuals that sat with him there on their names the same way the others do. So it's always these guys, they, them, stuff away from him. We call that disassociation. Then also, again, just as a follow-up from last week, I have to say, though, that Lewis came into this weekend with what I would normally call almost like with a calm centeredness. He was extremely relaxed. He looked relaxed. When you looked at his facial expression, you could clearly see there were more instances during interviews that he spoke from his heart than there were like it just tries to say something. And where he showed a little bit more vulnerability, what I mean by that is that he's just actually speaking something that we believe him, right? When he say that. And that's also why I said last weekend when I looked at his interviews that his whole demeanor, facial expression, IQs, everything implied that they are really, really struggling, as opposed to at that time, there were a lot of people indicating that they might be sandbagging, they might not be speaking the truth. They might, because you do that every year, they sandbag over the testing weekends and then they come out guns blazing in the first race and win the race. So yeah, based on that. So again, when the journalists ask him what were your expectations coming into the race, he'll spend, I don't know, an entire minute speaking about other people and other teams. In this instance, he did come back to himself and speak about himself. It was great to hear in the interview. He was using the terminology I more, because we really want to know what he feels. A lot of the journalists will ask him things about him and how you feel, and he will immediately disassociate himself, and he will speak about either other teams or he will speak about his own team. And he does that often, but it was good to see that he actually uses the term I more often. Going on from there, nobody really mentioned the word try again, except for Charles, and mentioned it a few times, 2 or 3 times. And then also some other metaphors that I picked up were things like, we'll fight for this for sure. It's literally, when you hear these metaphors, you can literally know that that is what the mind in a literal sense is doing, like physically, literally battling on the battleground. Lewis also used the metaphor of fighting. And then again, he went off again, speaking about other guys and them and they. And he again, journalists asked him, that the weekend, it might have been a little bit fortunate, but how does it feel to get a third place against the odds? And just ask him about that. And again, he mentioned about fighting with these guys, and he mentioned words again like it's going to be such a hard battle. It's a challenge. He actually says it's going to be such a hard battle, but we love a challenge. What was interesting is Toto Wolff was also interviewed on the track after the qualifier. And the journalist asked him something in the lines of, they have all of these challenges and problems. Well, they have all of these problems. Do we experience it as a challenge in the sense of he likes challenges, he likes to solve complex issues? And he just said no. Whether it's a problem or a challenge, it's exactly the same thing. So interesting. It was just something that I remembered. Like Lewis says, we love challenges. Toto Wolff doesn't like challenges in that sense. So, but yeah, Lewis went on again about using the word try. And then Charles Leclerc also said, again, a metaphor of movement. It wasn't the smoothest ride. But then he said a very interesting thing in the last reply. The journalist asked, how was the porpoising problem over a race distance? Obviously, it was the first time they had the race distance. And was it particularly uncomfortable in the car? And Charles answered him, and he just said, in Jeddah, I see some places where it might be coming in a place where, and he says, I can't remember, there are way too many turns or corners in Jeddah, but the fast left one, where I crashed last year. Now, why this is significant is Charles Leclerc has just won the first Grand Prix of the season, but he is already thinking about the corner where he crashed last year, which is really hopefully something that he has worked on this week, because if you know, your mind only does what you focus on, and he does not want to focus on the corner where he crashed last year. Now, so by removing and looking at the many times that they've used the word try, so to come back to that, by removing the try, we eliminate the possibility of the subconscious mind making a mistake. So we almost direct and drive the input that comes into our mind. It's a simple process. Some might think it's totally insignificant, but the effect of it can be extremely profound. Profound is the word I'm looking for. So our minds are extremely powerful in influencing behavior and our thought processes. So, which again then can influence our future outcome. And if people can realize that, that's the premise of my main premise of my coaching, my mental performance that I do, even with people that I help in specific behavioral issues and areas of their life. The main focus is the words they use, and then to understand and find out how did they get to that frame of reference, that picture they have in their mind that is using that word and throwing that word around all the time. So let's see what's happening this weekend. It is what, in 3 hours time, almost 1 to 2 to 3. Yeah, in 3 hours time, we'll watch the second Grand Prix of this season, and we are in Saudi, Jeddah. It's going to be a fun race to watch, and it's still wide open, obviously. It was weird to not listen to an interview of Max Verstappen, because you would think, oh, he's going to be in the post-race press conference, but he wasn't. And yeah, it's really going to be interesting to see how these people evolve and how their linguistics and the language they use evolve, and how that corresponds to their performance over the season. I'll see you guys